Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy. Thy will be done. In this session, I want to discuss a rather unfortunate situation that took place last week that just reinforces the idea that, unfortunately, interviewing is a staged, contrived event. It's kind of like democracy. It's really not very good, but it's the best we've got, so we use it. It has to do with a candidate that was really pretty perfect for this company. My client had been looking for close to 6 months. I finally came up with someone that was fitting the mold of exactly what they needed. And she did really well in the interview with the hiring authority himself. He then, of course, since she did well, passed her along to other people who interview in the situation. And lots of companies do this. They have a number of people interview a number of candidates, and they think the more people that they have interview the candidate, the less they're going to make a mistake. It's not true. But they had this candidate involved in another interviewing process with 3 other people. 2 of these other people were peers of the manager that was doing the hiring, and they were doing a video interview with her. And she sensed when she first got on the video interview with one of the employers or one of the managers that he was distracted, wasn't really interested in what was going on, and was doing this just more or less as a perfunctory type of thing. So he really wasn't all that engaged. The important message in this whole thing is that questions are really good. You have to ask them, and employers and hiring authorities have to ask questions. There's no doubt about that. But sometimes people don't get clarity on the questions, both on the candidate point of view, from the candidate point of view, as well as the hiring authority point of view. And this was a sad case in both of these situations. They were firing questions at her, and this lady is in sales, and I place mostly salespeople in the IT arena, and she was one of those. And one of the questions that one of these guys asked her in a rather flippant manner was, well, how'd you do on your quota 4 years ago? Well, she didn't remember what she did on her quota 4 years ago. She said, well, I feel like I'm sure I did well. I've always been 100, 110% of quota, but I don't really remember. In the final analysis, this guy came back and said to the hiring authority himself, well, she couldn't remember her quota. Not a lot of people can remember what their quota was 4 years ago. Now, to be fair, you're in an interviewing situation. It's probably a good idea to remember what your quota was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. You got to prepare for these things. She wasn't very well prepared for it. But the point is that the question is, does that really have to do anything with her performance and her ability to do the job? He then, one of the other managers, now this was on a video interview that was going to be a 35 or 40-minute interview. It was short, supposedly. He asked her, well, how many of your clients last year were new clients? Well, she works in the kind of business where the definition of a new client can be many things. She could have a client, a customer passed along to her by someone else. It could be one that she generated herself. It was a real, and she really didn't know how to answer it. She said, well, let me look at my record here. So she pulled up Salesforce, and she was trying to analyze which customers, in her opinion, were new and which ones were handed over to her, which were new to her, but not new to her company. Well, the guy didn't like the answer. And he said that he claimed that she didn't know what customers that she had were new or not. Well, she probably should have been ready for that question and probably should have had a better answer just without having to fumble around and find out which ones were new. But new is relative, and there was a different definition. Here's the point. Interviewing is a staged, contrived event. They eliminated this lady because they didn't feel like that she interviewed all that well. She didn't know what her quota was 4 years ago. She couldn't recite which customers were new and which customers weren't. Well, his definition of new and her definition of new might have been different. And we get hung up on these kinds of answers and make judgments about a candidate's ability to do a job based on those answers. And it's just simply not good. Now, I know that's what we do, and people aren't going to listen to me. They're going to continue to do it. But the point is, you want to look at a person's track record. You want to look at where they've been and how they've done. And that what they've done in the past is going to be a good indication of what they're going to do in the future. And you got to look at the whole thing. And getting hung up on one or two answers that a candidate gives in an interviewing situation is not only unfair, it's not really good business. No matter how well a candidate might do in an interviewing situation, may not have anything to do with their track record. Interviewing and performing on a job are really two different things. How many people have you seen in your career that were great interviewers? They interviewed really well, and then they got hired and they weren't very good performers. So you need to think about it. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashir with the Job Search Solution.